Welcome back. I'm going to do a quick video about how I pick up my stitches for the gusset after I've completed the heel flap and the heel turn. And just for reference point, the items that I'm talking about, this is the heel flap, here's the heel turn, and I'm actually going to pick up the stitches that are alongside here, which is the beginning step to create this gusset section. I'm going to work on the same socks I was working on when I did the heel turn, so I'm going to link that video below. I will also link the video below to my basic sock pattern and the actual sock pattern for the green socks that I'll be working on today. That's this. They're my birthday socks. So I've gotten to the point where I have 18 stitches left after the heel turn. And this is for a size women's sock. I've got 64 stitches in total for my sock body. I'm going to pick up the stitches that are along the edge into these slipped stitches. At the beginning of each row on the heel flap, you have a slipped stitch, and that's what creates this sort of chain look here. And I'm going to pick up my stitches within these chain stitches here. And in general, I would say that my rule of thumb is to pick up enough stitches to not leave any holes. Typically, personally, I get about 18 stitches. I'm going to use the same needle that I finished for my heel flap on to pick up my stitches. Oh, I'm sorry, I have a tangled mess here. There we go. Okay, so I do a knitted pickup. Where I'm actually going to go into that stitch and pick up as if I'm knitting. So the very first one that I go into is where my last decrease was. I don't go into the top stitch though, I go into that second stitch. And I find that if I sort of use my index finger to uncurl that edge, it really helps me see what I'm doing better. So I'm just going to go under here, and I'm going underneath both legs of that stitch. And I'm going to knit it on. And then the next one, I do the same thing. I go into both stitches and pick that up. So once again, I've got two picked up in the edges. I'm going to pick up a third stitch right here into the next one. And I often find that it helps, especially for beginners, to sort of look at the inside of the stock rather than the outside. If you're looking at that inside, you can really see the chain edge. So here I am going underneath both legs, and then I'll knit it on. And I just use my left hand to help me pull it over as if it were a needle. Go into both those edges and pick that up. Make sure I get both legs of that edge stitch. So if you look at the very edge here from the front, you can see that it looks like a chain, but this isn't really the edge of the sock. It really has one more stitch underneath it. That's only 1/2. So this leg here is part of this slipped edge stitch. So here we are looking at that edge again. If I turn it, you can see the stitches upright. I'm going to go under both those legs and knit it on. And I'll repeat that all the way up the edges, and I'll come back in just a minute when I get to this corner right here, and I'll address that. Okay, so I'm back here at the corner. I've picked up my stitches along that chain edge, and I have this sort of space. And this is where I really think there's fudge room. You can pick up as few or as many as you need to not have a hole right here. I typically will pick up the bar and make one right between this final stitch of the heel flap and the first stitch of the instep. But I also want to pick up one more in here. So I typically will look and see where's my gap. Now this is my last stitch right in here, so this is not the gap. The gap is actually going to be right here. So I'm going to go under, and this Don't be surprised if this one is a little tight, because what happens is this edge stitch is actually this yarn here. So as you're fudging with it, you kind of pull that stitch taut. So I'm just going to go in here and pick that guy up. And then I want to pick up this bar as a make one. So I'm going to pick them up. I use my left hand needle and I go into that bar, and then I'll knit it through the back loop. And this technically isn't one of the slipped stitches, but I find that it really helps not have a hole right where the two meet, where the heel flap and the instep meet. So there you go. And then I've got my original 18 stitches, and I know that I picked up 18 because I had counted them off screen. And I had 16, and then I just picked up 2 more. So I have 18 plus 18 on this one needle right now for 36 stitches. I'm going to work across the instep and come back when I get to the other side of the heel. Okay, so I have just knit across my instep, and I'm now at the foot part, so I am not repeating this pattern that I've done on the leg. I'm just going to do a stockinette foot. So I've knit across both those needles, and I'm now ready to pick up my stitches on the other side. And I'm going to have the exact same thing. It tends to curl under mine, so I have to uncurl it to get to these edge stitches, which is all the slipped stitches on the second edge. And I'm going to pick up underneath those stitches. And I like to do the same thing here where I've picked up this bar. So I just kind of put my needle in from the back and twist it, which is essentially just a make one, but I'm doing it with one needle. So I'm going to do that and then just pull that guy over. I find that my hands are just the easiest tool. Get this needle out of the way so you can see. I hope you can see that. Let me do it one more time so you can get a better look at it. Again, I go in from the back, I pick up that bar, and then I'm going to grab it. As I wrap my needle, I can just pull that stitch right over it. And then I'm going to begin my pickups. And again, this first stitch I want to pick up is the one that's attached to that bar. So you may find that it gets a little snug right there. So make sure I go underneath both legs. And it is significantly tighter than the rest of the ones that I'm going to pick up will be, because I've picked up that bar. And that really does a good job of keeping from having that hole right at the join. And then I'm going to continue down, picking up those edge stitches right in the loop. Oh, that guy fell right out. There we go. All right, continuing on, and I'm going to pick up probably 18 stitches, but again, there's some fudge room. If it's 17, 16, 19, it really is most important that you have not given yourself any space for a hole to be. And I just work my way through, making sure that I get both legs of that edge stitch all the way down. And I uncurl it again with my index finger to make sure that I'm getting those edges in. Legs. So here I am right at this corner, and again I'm going to pick up one stitch that's part of that last decrease, and I want to make sure I get the bottom one. So I'm just going to pop it underneath here, making sure I get both those legs. And now I want to knit 9 of the original 18 stitches I had onto my right hand needle so that my stitches will be divided very evenly. All right, so now I should have approximately the same number. And again, if you have one or more on one side than on the other, don't worry about it. You can take care of that as you're decreasing the gusset section, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So I'm going to show you the inside here. So where I've picked up along those chain stitches, it creates a really nice chain right inside your sock or your seam, if you will. You have these really refined lines here. And then this part here are part of the original 18 where you don't have the chain. That's part of the heel turn. So then you're going to work, what I like to do is work one full round. If you happened to have picked up these stitches fairly loosely, you may choose to knit them into the back loop. That's perfectly fine. It will really essentially be invisible anyway. And then you're going to work on a knit round and a decrease round. And your decreases are going to happen at this point here where you'll work until you have 3 stitches. You'll knit 2 together, knit 1. You'll work whatever your pattern is across your instep, and in my case it's just stockinette knitting. And then when you get here, you'll knit 1, do an SSK decrease, and then knit until the end. And then you'll do another knit round, and then you'll repeat the decrease round. And what you're doing in this section is you're creating the gusset here where you have all your decreases, and the part where we picked up is right here. Your stitches will go perpendicular from the heel flap where they come straight out, and the decreases placed here with the knit 2 together and that SSK, which mirror each other, give you the downward shape. This part here is the widest part of your foot. It's where your heel point from the top of your arch are. And this is why we have those extra stitches in here, is to bridge that really expansive part of your foot. And then as you're working through that and you're coming to your original stitch count, if you have an extra stitch on one side or the other, you just do a decrease on that one side in your final round. And it is really invisible. Nobody will know you had one more decrease than the other. But if you had a hole right here, we would all see that. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. I'm going to link all of my sock patterns that I use in here. My basic sock pattern is the heel flap, heel turn, and the gusset, exactly how I do it in my everyday pair of socks. It is my recipe, if you will, and I adjust the patterns on the leg or the top of the foot as it suits my personal preference in that particular case. I hope this was helpful and it demystified some of those picking up of the stitches. Again, feel free to leave me any questions you have below and I will get to them. Thank you.